All right. So this video is for anyone in the 557 third semester summer of 2021 semester. So we are going to talk through a couple of things as far as now that we're coming to the end of our third semester and our field experience overall, what are some things that we like, what is going to happen at the end of this? What do we need to do? What's going to be due? And how does that work? So a couple of things, I'm just going to go through a list to start, and then I'll circle back around and I'll talk about each thing in that list. So number one, first thing that's going to be due at the end of your 16 weeks is your contact hours log with your 300 hours. We'll come back to that and kind of go into detail of what the expectation is for that to look like. Second is your paperwork, which would be like your memorandum of understanding and your ALNet form. Laura Henley has been in touch if any of you are missing that. Most of you should be fine because you're here in this group right now, so that means you should be cleared, but we'll touch base on that. The third thing that will be due that we have not talked about yet, other than a brief introduction on it, is your on-site supervisor evaluation. That's in your syllabus, so we'll take a look at that here in just a minute, but that'll be something that will be due that we've not yet kind of dug into. And then the fourth thing that we've also not really talked about in detail that's going to be due is your final reflection for your field experience. So those are the four things that have to be turned in or completed by the end of this 16-week term. And so we'll kind of circle back around to it. Let me grab my folder and we'll talk about what each of those things requires. And I'll show you some examples also. All right, so the first thing that you guys are going to turn in is your field experience log. You've all turned in some version of this to me along the way for each semester. There is no required format or template that you have to use. Again, just for anyone who may have forgotten or may want to change their format, in your syllabus on page 26 is a field experience log that you can like if you log into ALNet and you download this as a Word document, you can edit this this copy. You can also copy this, print it, write on it, however you want to do it. You guys have shared some excellent contact hours logs. Some of you guys have like formulas and color coding set up in your spreadsheets for your domains and your hours and your major areas and your minor areas. So it can be as simple or as extravagant as you are comfortable with. But in the end, what you need to have to me is your 300 hours broken down by the domains. And you need to have noted on there your total hours for your major area, your total hours for your minor area, and then your total hours just overall. And then in your syllabus, kind of throughout the first half of it, but really looking at like page 12, it breaks down to tell you the minimum number of hours per domain. So again, just being aware as we start this third semester, where you are in comparison to the minimum number of hours for those domains. If you've met that requirement, if you haven't, like for some of you guys, you've not had many hours in a couple of the domains, just making sure that you know you need to get to that minimum number. Your on-site supervisor does not have to physically sign off on your contact hours log itself. They'll sign off as a part of the evaluation, which essentially just means they approve of what you've been doing overall. But the contact hours log will come to me for final approval. So that's part of the reason that I've been asking for them along the way, so that we don't have any surprises at the very end. Questions about your contact log? You guys have, you've done very well. You've sent it to me. I don't feel like there's really any surprises here.
I have a quick question, but how detailed of an explanation do you want for what we're actually doing on those? Because I mean, some of them are pretty self-explanatory, but some of them, they're kind of a gray area.
That's an excellent question. I'm fine with however much of an explanation you feel is necessary to help you on your final reflection, because we'll talk about that here in a little bit, but you're going to need to have details about a few of those experiences per domain to write about in your reflection. So if your contact hours log is simple, doesn't have an extensive write-up for each of those activities, but you can use that to reflect and complete your reflection paper, I'm fine with that. If it's anything that's not kind of typical, just some sort of short explanation, I mean, really just like the variety of contact hours logs, the difference in write-ups and summaries of those activities has varied just as much. So, and that's fine. I'm the one that will grade them in the end. So if I've mentioned anything to you or any of you guys about how you've explained your activities, then we can just work on that. But what I have seen so far seems fine. So really just kind of however much you need. And if there's anything that we need clarification on, I can always ask that. From here moving forward, and I'll mention this again at the end of our call, all of our meetings will be by cohort for this field experience. So we'll be able to dig into any questions, get into details or anything like that. But we'll finish this semester having a couple of check-ins per cohort. Great question. Any other questions about contact hours log?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I just want to clarify the 300 hours are due in August then at the end of these 16 weeks.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they are due. So you'll have your current 8-week term that you're in now, and then you'll have your summer 2 8-week term. And at the same end of your summer 2 term, this full semester, 16 weeks will end the same week and everything will be due at the same time. Great question. All right. So that was the first thing, your hours. The second thing is your memorandum of understanding and your ALNET form. Laura Henley is the main campus kind of coordinator of all of this paperwork for your field experience. She works with Dr. Miller closely on making sure that everyone has what they need. She has been sending emails in the last couple of weeks for anyone who is missing any of the things that they need to have. My understanding is that anyone who didn't have that paperwork completed was not able to start this semester. So my assumption is if you're here, you've got everything turned in for that. So I will do a final check with her just to make sure before we meet in our next check-in with your cohort specific. But again, that was just the memorandum of understanding that was in your packet, in your syllabus to start the semester. That was probably the very first thing that you guys sent to me. And then that looks like this. And then the ALNET form was the only thing that there's been some hang up, some glitchy stuff with, because the William Woods filter was catching it on the way out. And then if it made it out, it was getting stuck in the school filters. And then when the principals or your on-site supervisor would reply, it would get stuck somewhere. So there was a whole lot of back and forth craziness. But I will make sure that everybody has that finished. But again, if you're here, you should be in the clear. Any questions about either of those, the MOU or the ALNET form, approving your on-site supervisor? Okay, perfect. The third thing is your on-site supervisor evaluation form. So that is also in your syllabus that you can either, similar to the contact log, so you can download the syllabus and then trim it down to just the evaluation part. You can send it to your on-site supervisor electronically to complete that way, if they would rather do it that way. Or you can just print it off for them, they can circle it, you can scan it. either way. But starting on page 20, it's just 2 pages, and it's the on-site supervisor / mentor evaluation. It's just Likert scale type questions. They're broken down by domain. And then on the second page, there is an opportunity for comments from your on-site supervisor, as well as comments for you. So typically what that looks like is kind of like a normal teacher evaluation. Your on-site supervisor will give you a score. You'll sit down and talk about it, how you did. And then if you want to, the box sits for comments for you, the candidate. It's kind of like your opportunity if for some reason you would need to feel like you need to explain something further, offer a perspective to something, whatever it might be, a rebuttal statement. That's where that space goes. It's not required, but that's where that goes. Your signature and your supervisor's signature and date need to be at the bottom. And then this will get turned in, and I'll explain that in a minute too. So you can do this to where you send this to them in a Word doc, or you can give it to them on paper, but that will need to be completed by the end of the 16 weeks also. Any questions about the on-site supervisor evaluation? Pretty simple. All right, then the fourth thing that you guys will turn in by the end is your final field experience reflection paper. That is explained on page 27. Looks like this. And so this is where the description on your contact hours log is going to come in handy, really for you in this reflection piece, just knowing and remembering the details of those activities. So for this reflection, it's going to ultimately be about 10 to 15 pages, which is right. Everybody's eyebrows just went like up here. But I promise you, by the time you take each part of this and write about it, you'll be fine. You'll get to those pages, because what it's asking you to do is choose at least 4 activities per standard and discuss them in the paper. So you'll talk about the domains, you'll talk about 4 activities per standard, you'll talk about what you learned from it, how you can use this as a future administrator, any professional growth that came from those experiences. And then you'll also at the very end have a concluding paragraph as just like a summary of your field experience overall. So talking about your 300 hours collectively, your experience with your on-site supervisor, doing a field experience during a pandemic, getting 300 hours, like any of that can be a part of your final reflection paragraph. So by the time, and it also needs to have this cover page that's in your syllabus that all it does is just say your name, the date, the school district where you did your field experience, your cohort number and cohort location. It's just that basic information. But by the time you finish talking about all of those things, you'll get to that point. The other thing that I will also say is I am the one that's grading your reflection papers. So by the time we get to the end of this semester, probably you and I will have talked about either questions that you have about the reflection paper, questions that you have about the experiences that you want to choose, or activities or things like that. So we can work through the kinks of or any obstacles like that that you might have. What questions do you have about that? This is really the first thing that we've not talked about in detail. So what questions do you have? Diana.
You said at least 4 activities per standard. Do you mean the individual standards under the domain, or 4 activities per domain? 4
activities per domain. Yes, it says standard. If you look in here in your paragraph, it says 4 activities per standard, but then it clarifies your domains. So 4 activities per domain. in that paragraph, it gets kind of confusing because they use them interchangeably, standards and domains. But it's the domains that you're looking for.
Yeah.
I
You just
mean,
freaked me out a little bit.
Yeah,
We
we would
need
be here
one for
for
every
days.
single competency. It's going to be more than 15 pages. So
Yeah, right. Yeah, nobody has time for that to write it or score it. So domains, yes.
Okay.
Great question.
And you
Okay,
did say before, we also need to tell which competency it fits, like the number. Does
Right.
that need to be in that reflection paper?
yeah. So you'll, as you're kind of describing it and connecting it to the domain, you'll kind of almost put it in as like a citation of what competency it fits with.
I have another question that kind of goes along with that, and I think I know the answer, but I want to double check. The other day I was going back through looking at my log and trying to make sure that I didn't miss any of those course specific activities that are that we can include in our field experience. And I know that each of those are listed in the syllabi for each individual class, but is there like a master copy of those activities in the degree program, or do we need to go back and double check each syllabi?
I think, Diana, correct me if I'm wrong, because you and I talked about this. I think you and I talked about this also. On page 12 of your syllabus, it just mentions generally, like what you're saying, that EDU 520, 568, there's about 10 hours to include. 570 has about 20 hours to include. And so to my knowledge, it would be really helpful if it was, but I don't know that those specific activities are listed in one space. I think, Diana, you just went back into those syllabi and found the activities that were written into those syllabi. Is that correct?
Yeah, and they have them marked, you know, which assignments you can use for field experience hours. And I just had to go back through the syllabus and find those again.
Yeah.
I have a question about those.
Yeah.
Does it, like, can we use those? I don't really know how to word this. I'm sorry. I don't know where to put it, like in major or minor. Can we use them? Like if I need more of my minor hours, can I list that in the minor area? Since I was looking at it as an administrator and sometimes not necessarily from a certain grade level, or.
Yeah, I think you can kind of find where it would make sense based on what you did in like for that specific activity. So if it could apply to either area, use that as some of your discretionary hours that can kind of go back and forth. And then if it's specific to a upper or lower grade level, secondary or elementary grade level, then obviously put it where it would fit for whichever of those is a major or minor for you. The other thing that I will mention is for, I think it was 570, the relational school leadership. For that class has about 20 hours. It's not as explicitly laid out in your syllabus, but it is in there that will show you, I think there were 2 activities that counted for that. So just know when you go into your 570 syllabus, like all the other ones do a really nice job of saying this activity, this many hours, or approximately this many hours. But that 570 syllabus, for whatever reason, is really, I mean, if you look in the assignments part of the syllabus, it's there, but it's not so like in your face as the other syllabi are. But yeah, you just use those hours either in your discretionary hours, if it's applicable to any level, or in the level that the work that you did would apply. Good questions, great questions.
That 570 was the one that you emailed me about, I think, and it was the release of a tenured teacher. That one counted, and the observations and walkthroughs assignment, that one counted.
Yeah, perfect. You guys, if you don't have that already in your log, jot that note down, that those are the 2 assignments in that class that counted for your hours.
And one more question on that. I know you covered this in the last meeting. I wasn't there. I watched the video and I want to make sure that I'm, just because I'm paranoid.
Yeah.
So activities at the middle school, 7th and 8th grade can count towards either, correct?
Yeah, since the administration degree is now K-12, they've really just kind of loosened up at the university level on where that dividing line is. So just wherever and however you need to categorize it would be fine. Really, in the end, when I'm going to be scoring your contact hours log, I'm looking at each activity in the hours, making sure that there's not like, duplications or excessive hours for something. But I'm just looking to see, are you getting your hours as appropriate for your major and minor areas? How did you use your discretionary hours? Just kind of making sure you have it. I mean, I'm not going to be like fine tooth comb going to catch something at the end. If I haven't mentioned anything by now, or if we don't get to it in discussions in your cohort groups between now and week 16, you'll be fine.
Okay, just wanted to double check because I work in a middle school and I'd planned on doing summer school at the high school specifically so that I could get those hours there. And now because of COVID and a bunch of other things, we're all doing summer school in one building. So that makes it a whole lot easier.
Yeah.
Like K through 12 in one building for summer school, but thank you.
Yeah. And we can, as we go along in this last semester, we can, in our cohort groups, we can get specific on problems and here's an activity, would this count or could I count it for this? And the other thing that you can also do, some of you have done when you send me your logs or when we're meeting in cohort groups, if you have a question, you can like either, depending on how you have it, so insert a comment or a track change or something like that into your log, your contact hours log, and send it to me, or just send me your log and ask me questions in an email body and I can kind of go back and forth and we can troubleshoot any of that. But this is not meant to be and isn't any sort of gotcha situation. Like we will figure everything out leading up to week 16 so that once we get to week 16, all you're doing is your final uploads, maybe final calculations of hours, finishing touches on your reflection, and you should be okay.
Do the discretionary hours get labeled differently or do we still count them as a major, minor?
Yeah, you can still count them just in your major, minor areas. And then I'll just factor that in when I'm looking at all of it. So that being, oh, go ahead.
What if we can't get the full 300? Sorry, what happens if we can't get the full 300 and we get like 275?
Yeah. So if that's the case, if we get a couple more weeks into this or even halfway through the semester, we're feeling like 300 is not going to happen, knowing that we have all the way into August. So there's lots of stuff that comes up last minute and the beginning of August for back to school that administrators could always use help with. But if that's the case, then you can either reach out to me individually through email or phone call or message or whatever, or we can talk about it in your cohort group and we'll try and troubleshoot and see if there's something that can't be done. But I will say, I mean, out of the 5 RPCs that supervise the field experiences, we've always found a way to get everybody to their 300 hours. So we will figure out a way. It'll be all right. But definitely keep me posted as we meet in cohorts over the next several weeks if you're feeling like it's not even going to be close. All right, so as far as those 4 things that are due at the end, those are all due as uploads in VIA. So one of the things that we'll talk about in our next meeting together is the VIA link, because sometimes that's really tricky to find because we don't use it all the time. So we'll talk about next time where that VIA link is and how to do it. But those 3 of the 4 things will go in that VIA link. Your contact hours log will be uploaded, and that's uploaded on its own. Then your on-site supervisor evaluation, that rating scale, is uploaded as a separate upload or document. And then your final reflection paper is also uploaded as a separate assignment or upload. So all three of those things have to be uploaded into VIA, and then they're scored in VIA. It connects to ALNet, but it has to be uploaded into that. And so those are the three things that need to be uploaded to close out the semester. Any questions about contact hours log, your MOU or ALNet form, on-site supervisor evaluation, or reflection, or uploading to VIA?
That's the question I have, is uploading to VIA. I'm not exactly sure, and maybe I've already done that because I've turned in my memorandum of understanding, but I don't remember that.
Yeah, you probably haven't. You may have done it for another class. I have not asked you to do any of that, anything in VIA for field experience. And so when we meet next time in your cohort groups, I'll kind of walk you through that. I'll screen share, show you where the login is through ALNet, and then show you how to upload it. So we'll definitely take care of that. Okay.
I thought I saw something where you had to do like not action research, but basically you had to solve a problem or something. Did I misread that somewhere, or is that for a different class? I don't know what that is.
So that you're talking about the performance assessment and solving the instructional problem, most likely.
Yeah, I think that's, yeah.
So that is technically, that is not necessarily a part of field experience. However, it is kind of killing two birds with one stone. If you're able to do that work during your field experience semesters, because then you can count the hours that you're doing that as field experience hours. So, but it is, the performance assessment is not something that has to be done now. It's done at the very end of your program. And we will talk about, once we get into your cohort groups, that is in addition to talking about VIA, and then any questions you have about your final reflection, that's going to be the main part of our conversation in your cohort groups, is checking in on each of your improvement projects or improvement activities, seeing how they're going, what questions you have. Just big picture about that is, so hopefully you guys got an email from Dr. Concannon and or Sheila Logan. I'm not sure who it came from, but it was an email that explained that because DESE changed the certification and the requirements for certification, therefore William Wood's program requirements had to change. Now, probably when some of you started, the EDU583, which is performance assessment, was not listed on your plan. If you're relatively new, which for you guys, since you're in your third field experience, I feel like you're probably far enough along into your program that you probably are in the group that had it added afterward. But the EDU583 is your performance assessment. So kind of looking at it from Mile High, during your field experience, you can multitask and use hours to your advantage as you find an instructional problem and you work through research ideas on how to improve whatever your instructional problem is, training your faculty and staff on whatever that improvement strategy is, so on and so forth. You're doing that during your field experience hours, if possible. If you can't, it's okay. You still have time to do it. Kind of the second part of that is one of your almost very last courses, drawing a blank on what course number it is right now, but it's like your capstone or like your final field experience or something like that. In that class, you actually do a practice write of your performance assessment. So if you have been able to work on your instructional problem and your solution during your field experience, then you get to your final set of classes, and your instructor and like your project basically for that class is doing a rough draft of your performance assessment. You're getting some peer feedback from your colleagues and your instructor. So you've now had your field experience and then one of your final classes to work on a rough draft. Then the very last semester of class, or I'm sorry, term of classes that you will take, your very last 8 weeks, will have that EDU583 1 credit hour course. If it's not on your course plan now, but you're getting your building admin certification, that please email me and we need to figure that out for you. But it's a 1 credit hour course. And the only thing that you're doing in that course is the performance assessment. So you have 8 weeks where you're working with your assigned instructor for EDU583. You're emailing back and forth drafts of your performance assessment, getting feedback. You're there kind of coaching you along the way, offering any, feedback pieces or strategies or anything that you might need. And then at the end of that 8 weeks for EDU583, you turn in your assessment, your final draft of your assessment, and that's your performance assessment part of your certification. So between your field experience, your rough draft with your peer feedback, and then your final 583 where you get feedback from an instructor, and then you get your final score, all of that, you will have had plenty of help getting ready for that. And your 583 course is really as beneficial as you make it. So I have taught the 583 course before, and I've had some performance assessment writers who never reach out to me in 8 weeks. And I set deadlines every 2 weeks. If you want them, turn in part 1 this week, I'll provide you feedback. Part 2 by this week, I'll give you feedback, so on and so forth. There are people who just think that they can wait till week 8, knock it out, send it in, pass the test. Oftentimes, that's not the case. They usually have to retake that 583. If you take advantage of having a William Woods instructor who's going to score your performance assessment, provide you feedback throughout the 7 weeks of that EDU 583, by the time you get to week 8, really all you should need to do is final edits and tweaks and submit it, and you should be fine. Your instructor can, now they can't give you super specific feedback that's going to basically write the assessment for you, but they can give you some guidance on if you're going in the right direction, if you need to rethink something, if you're missing an artifact, or if you're missing a commentary for something, so that nothing kind of comes up as a surprise in the end. But technically, kind of to circle back to your question, the performance assessment itself is not a part of your field experience. It's mentioned in your syllabus because you can use that work for field experience hours, but you don't have to have any of that written or figured out or anything. I mean, technically, you don't really need to do any of it in field experience. We just bring it up so that if you're working on it, you're counting it for hours. Great question. And so, like I said, once we get into in the next couple of weeks, as we get into our cohort meetings for specifically your cohort needs, we can touch base on your topics that you guys have sent to me, where you are, how you're feeling in the process, if you've hit a roadblock or if you need a new idea. Some of you between second semester and now might be changing jobs or changing roles or changing districts. And so you might have to rethink your instructional plan. So we can talk through any of those issues that come up too. Any questions about third semester field experience, anything that we talked about today, or performance assessment questions that I can jot down and we can be ready to talk about in our next meeting.
I have one quick question, and I know I've seen it before, but I don't remember. You said that some of us, the 583 would have been added into our course plan. I don't remember how to look and check how to get to that course plan. I know I've seen it before, but that's been almost a year ago.
Sure. I'm not 100% on where, like, so my LNet and portals look different as an instructor than they do on your end. So for me, I access it differently. And our Sarah Hamilton, who used to do the advising, is not there on campus anymore. She's changed her job. But what I can do is I can pull that up. Your cohort kind of lead should be able to have that for you. But if not, I can also pull it up and I can email it to you. Let me see. We've got.
That's something that would be helpful for, I mean, we're virtual cohort 2.
Yeah.
Jason and I are.
Yeah.
So if you could, maybe when we meet as a cohort, if you could have a copy of that for all of us, that would be really helpful.
Absolutely. I'll just make that the case for each of you guys, each of your cohorts as we meet. I'll just have that ready and I'll email it out to you guys when I email out the links and the information for the next meeting.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And then I'll just make a note of how I got to it. I don't know if it will look the same for you or if navigating LNet would look different on your end, but I can at least explain it. We'll see if that works for you. Okay, so the last thing that I just want to mention, and then I will be sure to let you guys go so that you have time before your classes start. So I'm gonna kind of keep everything going on an every other week-ish kind of schedule. So on like last week, I met with those in the 600 level field experience. This week, I'm meeting with you guys. I'll meet with them again next week. So the week of May, or I'm sorry, the Wednesday, May 26th is when we will have another meeting. So the way that I've set it up for the other group is that we have about 20-ish minutes to check in, 20 to 30 minutes to check in per cohort group. So I might, because there's 4 cohorts for you guys, I might do 2 of you on Wednesday, the 26th, and then the other 2 on Wednesday, June 2nd. So we'll kind of just play it by ear and see how it goes. I know sometimes some of you guys are combined cohorts in your classes anyway. They're kind of going back to separating you out into your main cohorts, gearing up for hopefully being back in person. But I will send you guys emails to let you know for sure. And even though we're meeting by cohort specific, the same thing applies. If you can't be there for the meeting, it'll be recorded, it'll be shared with your cohort specifically. You can always email me questions and ask me after you watch that. And I will problem solve to make sure that you guys are set for the end of the semester. But we'll try to shoot for that Wednesday, May 26th, or Wednesday, June 2nd. So I will send you emails. Hopefully tonight I'll be able to send those emails out to you so that you know which day your cohorts will be. Okay, any final questions before I'll stop the recording? And then you guys are free to take 10 minutes before your classes begin. I always say I'm not going to take a ton of your time, and then I take at least like 45 minutes of your time, but you guys have good questions, so.